right, good morning.
Yes, good morning. It's 9 o'clock. And now we're seeing the people coming into this webinar this morning. My name is Stefan Heinz. I'm working with sustainability and sales at SustainLab. And together with me today, I have the co-founder Maria Svantemark, and also the CEO of SustainLab. And you are now visiting the webinar of the post-Omnibus and the strategic navigation to future-proof your sustainability data. So while we're waiting for people to join, feel free to write an answer to this question in the chat. Are you still considering the full-scale CSRD, or are you thinking about downsizing the CSRD, or is it even considering the VSME standard? Just a short note in the chat if you want to share where you are in your thoughts today. Also, during this webinar, of course, you're more than welcome to write any questions in the questions tab, and we will end this conversation with a Q&A and pick this up for everyone. So we see the numbers are picking up the first minute now. And so the agenda for today is the importance of navigating forward. Of course, we will go through the current situation and the challenges that exist, but our main message is that it's never an option to stop or wait for everything to clear up. Strategic navigation is crucial to understand and manage the landscape we are moving in, and to break it down in steps moving forward, to actively shape the path instead of letting uncertainty guide us. So while the Omnibus directive is still a proposal, it's very complex. But that's precisely why it becomes even more important to have a clear direction and a clear strategy. In the recent weeks, we've been discussing this with a lot of companies, and we can just relate to change. The options are available, and how we can ensure that we are not just reacting to change, but actually driving development forward, while ensuring we support our customers on a regulatory basis in their risk appetite and ambition going forward. So, Maria, a few words about yourself and SustainLab before we go into the webinar.
Thank you, Stefan. It's great to be here this morning and share half an hour, 45 minutes with all of you. My name is Maria Svantemark, and as Stefan said, I'm the co-founder and CEO of SustainLab. So my background is as a sustainability manager, which I know many of you are today, listening in or in the sustainability, some sort of sustainability role. And the reason why I founded SustainLab 5 years ago was that I wanted to have access to business critical data on a more regular basis, so that I could take strategic decisions that moved the company forward in a better direction. And that's exactly what we are helping our customers with. So SustainLab is a full sustainability solution provider, and offering both SaaS software to collect, analyze, visualize sustainability data, of course, also for reporting, but for all of your other data needs as well. And in combination with that, we offer consultancy services to help you going from point A to point B in your sustainability journey. And we do know, not least now, that point B, when it comes to sustainability, will always change. So the aim for us is to help you spend less time on data handling, so that you have more time to accelerate the change we really need. So with that,
before we jump into all the interesting information that we're going to share, is just a suggestion. Keep a question in your mind during the next 30 minutes. Is the data helping you to achieve your needs and goals? just keep that with you during this next 30 minutes. So after this webinar, we will also get you a short survey to measure and understand the collective way forward. What are we thinking as a collective with all of this on the table? So we hope you can find 3 minutes to supply your answer, and in return, we will also get you the access to the overall results from all of this. We will also give away one of our strategic navigation workshop sessions for free to one of you as a token of appreciation. So, Maria, let's go.
Yeah, and we're going to start with the latest about Omnibus. When we sent out the invite to this webinar, we said we probably going to need to have a small bit about Omnibus, even though that's not going to be the focus. But as we know, the proposal changes and some things become clear over time. So we want to have a joint understanding of where we're at today when it comes to Omnibus. So when it comes to Stop the Clock directive, the final text is published. And in that, large wave 2 undertakings will report in 2028 on full year 2027 data, and listed SMEs, so wave 3, will report in 2029 on full year 2028 data. And the EU member states have until 31st of December this year to transpose this into national legislation. And this was news for a couple of weeks back, so not fully new news, but it's the latest when it comes to Stop the Clock. When it comes to the second part of the Omnibus to simplify ESRS, the Commission has given EFRAG the assignment to provide technical advice on this revision and how to simplify the ESRS. And EFRAG has published a work plan, which you see in the bottom right corner here, the green 1 to 5 points on when this simplification will happen. And the key focus areas when it comes to this simplification is to reduce the number of data points, the shall statements, with the aim of reducing complexity. So we're going to see amendments to the scope in that sense. But we're also going to see a clarification on how ESRS 1 and 2 relates to the topical standards. What will not change, however, is that we're still going to see the need for year-on-year comparisons, and that assumptions and methods needs to be disclosed. And this is important because ensuring that you have well-documented assumptions, methodologies, and year-on-year comparisons is essential for data reliability and comparability between companies, which is one of the main reasons for the CSRD legislation in the first hand. And the last part about Omnibus then, the scope, who will need to report, that is still fluid and not decided. So the debate on which companies are in or out scope, and I think a lot of you have seen this 1,000 employees threshold, that is still in debate and it's not finalized yet. So this will need to follow closely to see which undertakings will be in scope for reporting for CSRD and not. So where does this leave us? Well, this leaves us with some more knowledge since we have knowledge about Stop the Clock, but we still see that there are still things that are movable, the simplification efforts and the scope. So this means that what should we do now then? Well, we have talked, as Stefan said, the last weeks and months with hundreds and hundreds of customers and prospects. And we're going to share some of the main insight from those conversations here today. But the main insight, I would say, is to don't lose momentum. Momentum takes time to build. And if we stop now completely, we lose more than only the time we stopped for, because it will take time to build new momentum. But how are we going to navigate? Well, that depends on us as a company. Where do we want to go and where do we need to go? And I think this framework is quite helpful to think around, because there are different ways of going. We can go for a full CSRD compliance. We can choose to voluntarily report on the ESRE standards and pick and choose a bit more. We can go for the VSME standard, or we can choose other voluntary reporting. And what we choose depends on both our level of ambition, and our risk aversion. So in the current status, your company today, where do you stand? How far are you in your sustainability journey? Have you done a double materiality analysis or not? But also, what other stakeholders do you need to consider? What information does your bank want, your insurance company, your customers, your employees, and so on and so forth? The other question to ask yourself is your future legal scope and goals and ambition. Where do you want to go? Do you want to be a leader in your industry, or are you fine with being compliant and that's it? Of course, your ambition is going to be probably the most important denominator to understand which route is the right one for you. And then lastly, risk tolerance. There are risks with all of these 4 choices, but which of these risks are you willing to take and which aren't you willing to take? And one thing to consider here as well is how your organization is staffed and equipped. So if we wait longer, because we take the risk of waiting, we're fine with that risk. Do you then have the resources you need to accelerate and work faster going forward? Or do you need to use time to your advantage and start perhaps slower, but over time reach a further end goal? So these questions is good to consider. And of course, it's not only you listening in that needs to consider this. This is a work that is very, very strategic and needs to be done with the leadership team and your colleagues there. But one thing we want to highlight is then the 4 different routes. The most strategic path to choose really depends on who you are and the level of ambitions, the risk you're willing to take, and so on. So let's look at them one by one. If we choose to go for a full CSRD, report, so with that we mean you do your double materiality analysis, you report on everything that is material, you have your auditor looking at it, and so on and so forth. What are the risks with this? Well, there is a risk, depending on how the Omnibus proposal plays out, that you do some unnecessary work and that you waste resources for non-business critical data. So in reporting in such a large and extensive framework as CSRD is, of course, there are things that are more business critical to you and that are less business critical. And with reporting on everything, you run the risk of investing resources in what might not be the most business critical information for you to collect and process. The benefit, however, is of course that you are ready for any outcome. So no matter what the Omnibus goes, you are fully ready, and you know that you actually don't need to care so much about the changes going forward because you are there already. You're also in a pole position. So this is a stolen from the motorsport. So pole position is the most strategically or the most adventurous. The best position to have at the start of a race, the statistically best position to have at the start of the race. And you are able to lead in your industry as well. And of course, we should not forget that quite often when we talk about CSRD and Omnibus and so on, we get very, very focused on the law and the data points and the exact thresholds. But sometimes we forget the aim of imposing this legislation, and that is that we will have a more sustainable society. And one part of that is to make sure we have comparable data between companies so that investors, customers can choose where to put their money, and in that way steer the financial flows towards the more sustainable companies. And the other part of that is for companies themselves to get better understanding of their own business, of their own value chain, to understand their risks and opportunities better so that they can take more strategic decisions. So with doing a full CSRD work, you get a lot of insights into your own operations that you can use to your strategic advantage. If we move on to voluntary ESRS or Omnibus CSRD, and with this we mean that you pick and choose a bit more of the standards you choose to report on. perhaps you've already done your double materiality analysis, you know what your material scope is, but you choose to, instead of reporting on 600 data points, you might report on 300, and you choose the ones that have the highest materiality to you. Well, the risk here is a potential of not having a complete enough scope, depending on where Omnibus goes. There's also less insights into fringe questions. So those questions that are not perhaps core to your business and very high materiality, but they are still material, but a bit less material and a bit on the outside. And here's actually an identified risk for the society, that there are some parts of the ESRS standards that more companies think are material to their own operations and that more companies will work with. But there are also other questions, for example, pollution, where less companies deem them as core to their business. And that can, for us on a societal level, end up that actually no one or very few companies work with combating pollution. And yes, while climate change, that I think many of you have identified as material, is important to work with, that's not the only important sustainability question. And we need to have companies and players working also on the other sustainability areas. The last risk is a questionable market value. How will the market evaluate this type of report? Unsure. When we come to the benefit of this approach, it's a bit more pragmatic approach. You can focus on your core business, so you can decide to double down on what's really important for you and understand that and those insights really, really well. And doing that with less resources. So it's faster for you to start, it's faster for you to gain results and create value, but within the more limited scope. There's also a benefit which I think was really interesting, and this comes from one of our customers who said, we want to go with ESRS standards because we think that this is going to be the universal language of sustainability, or at least universal within Europe. So by starting to work with the ESRS standard, we speak the language of sustainability that also our customers and the banks and our insurance companies and so on will speak. And we think that is a very important value of the ESRS standards as well. I think that was an interesting and very wise way of looking at it. Next then, VSME. Whether VSME is a good choice or not depends on how far you come and also the size of your company. There were usually, or recently, a debate in EFRAG about the VSME standard and that it's potentially not suitable for companies that are more than 250 employees. So if you're more than 250 employees, I would look at this closely, whether the VSME is a good standard for you. But it also depends on how much reporting you have done previously and how used you are to sustainability reporting. The risk here is that the scope is even more limited than with the voluntary ESRS, so that you might not capture enough value to really gain strategic insight, which is what you want to get from all of this work of collecting and processing this data. The market response, depending again on who you are, could be negative, that it's a bit of an easy way out, even though it's not easy for all companies, but for some that they perhaps should have chosen a bit of a bigger costume than VSME, the market response might be negative, and that it can be viewed more as a checkbox exercise than value creation. But again, if you haven't done any reporting before, it can be a really, really good starting point. It gives you an overview of your business and it gives you a standard to lean on. It also opens up for further analysis and creates internal engagement and this very important momentum that you can then use to leverage new work going forward. And I think one thing that we see with all of our customers is that once you start to collect and process data, you gain more and more insights and you have this wheel started spinning. So if you haven't started, VSME can be a really good starting point to get access then to even more insights into your business. And lastly then, other voluntary reporting. Well, depending on your stakeholders, you might want to report to your bank, your insurance company, to CDP, to science-based targets. It can be many standards, fragmented standards, which can lead to complex data collection. and comparability between companies to be low. And it could also run a risk if you don't do this in a very strategic way, that it becomes a bit ad hoc. Oh, now we need to report that to the bank. Now we need to report that to the insurance company, and so on and so forth. The benefits here is that the reporting is tailor-made for your organization. You can choose to double down on really what's important for you. It's also tailor-made for the stakeholders. So the stakeholder will probably be quite happy with the reporting if it's done well. And it also allows for innovation. If we all of us only report to the standard always, there is no innovation here. So choosing your own path could allow for innovation when it comes to data collection and reporting. So after having these 4 routes, Stefan, could you give some insights to the key outcomes of customer discussions and trends?
Yes, of course. So being in conversations with existing customers and with potential customers on a daily basis, we can spot some trends and what they talk about and how they reason about this. So the most common concrete outcome is don't slow down, but adjust the scope by focusing more on the core business for your company, rather shifting from an EU perspective to a company perspective. What is important for you and your company, and what you need to understand and track. So that's the most common outcome, I would say. So, and ensuring a data strategy that it's flexible. So, and we understand and we know that most companies need some outside help to get this, going, and that's what many are aiming for. Some companies that didn't or hadn't come so far before Omnibus, they initially now choose to stop, but now also reconsidering after understanding more about their business perspectives. So including the competitive landscapes and what competitors are doing, your company can't just sit on the sideline and watch. So you need to ensure that you have all the facts and all the understanding of the competitive landscape to be on the top, to be able to move forward. And so the next slide.
Yeah.
I was a bit fast there.
Yeah, but thanks, Stefan, for sharing those. But who would want this data then? If you do all the work of collecting it, which are the stakeholders that you might want to consider, accept them for what's the competition doing?
Yes, exactly. So here we put together the most common conversation we have today is regarding banks, financial institutes, investors, green loans, etc. They require this kind of information and updated and transparency around it. Also, customer requirements, different. Yeah, like you mentioned before, Maria, different customers have different requirements, and you need to be top of the game there as well. Or as for your employees, to create a great place to work, to be that employer that are taking this serious. And of course, the local demands, and many different, depending on your industry, what they need from you and your sustainability data.
And I think one example here from a recent conversation we had regarding the banks was one of our company we're talking with, who said that they need to improve their emission reduction. They need to reduce their emissions by 2% year on year to keep their loan. And of course, when you have those other stakeholder demands to take into account, you can't kind of pull the handbrake and completely stop. You have other things to consider and ensure you have the data to deliver to those.
Exactly.
So how to get started then when the outcome is still a bit unknown? Well, we'd like to split this work of collecting and processing data into constant versus dynamic dimensions. So the constant dimension is to gather data in a granular format that allows then for different types of reporting. So this is what we used to call, this is what we call the constants. That could be, for example, waste data. It could be diversity data. It could be water data. It's relevant to your business, but you have all available metadata to it. So as an example here, we might have an office in our organization when it comes to waste that have access to the data, such as we report plastics per kilo and we know it's recycled. Whereas in a factory, we might split this even further and say this is PPPE type of plastic. We collect it in tons and it has a code 165284 that tells what has happened with this plastic once it left our facilities and it has been recycled. That's what that code means. So if we collect this data in this granular format, we can then decide which KPIs do we want to build on top of this data, and what does that mean for the reports we can do. Well, we can change. We can choose to do VSME reporting 1 year and voluntary ESRS the next, or we can start from a voluntary ESRS perspective and we can upscale to full CSRD or downscale to VSME. Because when it comes to processing the KPIs, well, today we think that, okay, what we need to report on is waste in tons. We don't care if it's plastic, we don't care if it's recycled. We just need to have the full waste in tons. But if we then shift standard and say, oh, actually, in this standard, I need to report on the percentage of recycled plastic, that's no problem if you have collected the granular data. It's just to recalculate the KPI. And this puts you at the time of a reporting where you can start with the raw data and you can structure it, and then you can just change your way going forward to which is the reporting framework you choose. And this gives you a very, very flexible approach that is also very future-proof. But which of these constant data should I start with then? Well, if you're over 250 employees, use your DMA to understand areas or conduct one. If you're less than 250 employees, you can actually look in the VSME standard. It has quite some guidance on whether something is applicable or not to report on. If you haven't done a DMA, you can also talk to your industry association who might have very good information for you, or you can come and talk to us. We work with loads of different companies in different industries and are happy to help. And I did a bit of pre-work and talked to some of our customer success managers of what data is common to start with. And by no surprise, GHG emissions, scope 1 and 2, parts of scope 3 is common to start with. We have different sorts of waste data, water data, and how it's used by source. Energy-related data, that is, of course, part of GHG emissions, but also interesting in itself. When it comes to the social side of data, we have diversity, inclusion data, employee well-being, and so forth, but also occupational health and safety, injury rates, safety training, and so on. And then don't forget your supply chain. What's the coverage of code of conduct? What are major supply chain risks? And what are the workers in the value chains, how they are treated? This gives a good overview. And then, of course, this needs to be tailor-made according to which industry you're in and which exact organization you are. But here's a bit of a starting point, at least.
Yes, and so why does this really matter? What is the worst that can happen if you don't have a real data strategy in place? So these are a couple of things that we found out by talking to our customers. And so no data strategy, no control. If you don't know what you're collecting, where is it coming from, or is it truthworthy, you are making your decisions blindly. And you're exposing yourself to legal action. Weak data means non-compliance. It leads to poor audits and maybe fines and loss of trust. Reporting doesn't mean results, but most companies report, but few of them use the data to actually improve. So data strategy makes the difference here. It doesn't just tick the boxes. And of course, it impacts results. Better data leads to better decisions. And it saves time and money. Bad data takes longer to clean up than it would be taken to take the right in the first time. The momentum is also now. Knowledge is short-lived. Don't let it go to waste. So the next here is that how can we help you from SustainLab, and how can we make you move forward? So we can help you to mitigate your risk with our hybrid model and we call it Omnibus license, which is the voluntarily ESRS license possibility to start small now and then upgrade later if you want to, or even downgrade to VSME if that's the way that you want to move. And this together with, of course, the strategic navigation workshop that it's tailored for you and your leadership to take on board all this new information and make it right for you. So now we're coming to an end of this, and if you have any questions, please put them in the questions tab on your far right, and we will try to get them answered there. So let's start with one of these here. What are the values of using a system in these turbulent times? What are the values that I cannot get from the manual efforts in, for example, Excel? Can you help me with that, Maria?
Yeah, of course. Well, a good question. First of all, there are a multitude of benefits. First of all, when you work with a system like ours, we ensure that we keep up to date with the standards. And as we saw, there are changes coming to the ESRS standards. There are also discussion about changes in the VSME standard. So just knowing that, someone else will take care of ensuring that the standard I report to is up to date to the latest version. I think that is something that at least would help me to sleep better at night. So that's the first thing. The other thing is that it gives you this flexibility that we talked a bit about. You can start and you can remodel. You can start to collect actually more data than you might need at first, but in a very strategic way. And then you can model and remodel it according to your needs. I would also say that parts of this, Excel would be a fine option. So for example, the VSME standard in itself is not very hard. Answering the data points or the questions of VSME standard isn't very hard. You could probably manage in Excel. But breaking those down and getting to that final number that you need to report, that's the challenging trick. And if you don't have experience of that, if you don't have knowledge in how to assign emission factors, how to categorize data so it makes sense or in according with the GHG protocol, if you don't know how a question should be answered to be in accordance with the legislation or a standard, well, then a system support is really, really great to have because it gives you all of that. Or I can only speak for ourselves, but at least we do all of that. So ensuring that no matter if you're going to answer yes or no to a data point, we're going to make sure that the answer you input is in accordance with what you need to do for that standard. Is there anything you would add there, Stefan?
No, just what you said. The summarize here is if you're still on a path that just want to be compliant, and that's the whole reason, you may survive a year doing that in Excel. But if you want to live and develop and do this over time, you need a system in place to help you with this, that is taking away the connection to each one individual, because people move. And if you have that in Excel and emails and even phone calls, that's not scalable over time. So of course there need to be a system in the backup to help you develop over time. But that's what he said. So the next question here is actually around the topic that we're going to send out in this survey that I mentioned to everyone before. So you will get a survey, and we hope you can spend 3 minutes on it to help us and together understand where is the community moving forward as of now. And as a token of appreciation for you helping us to understand this, you will also get the overall results to yourself. And we will also share one of you to get the strategic navigation workshop for free from us. So the question is, what do you think most companies might do? Will they keep the focus on CSRD or the volunteer ESRS, or is it VSME? What do you think, Marie?
Yeah, I look forward to getting the outcome of the survey, but from the discussions we had, I think the majority of companies take a pragmatic approach and go for the voluntary ESRS standard, at least as of now, because you can get started and collect this data that you need for in line with the ESRS standard. And then you can always add on more if you realize that, oops, we actually need to do a full CSR report. Then you have gotten started already, and you have hopefully the majority of the data you need. So looking forward to the results, but that's where my bet would go. That's the outcome we'll see.
Maybe we have time for one more question here. So how do I get my leadership team on board? I know the value of this, but the board and the management do not see the ROI. How can I get help, or what do I do with this?
Yeah, and I think this is so common, and unfortunately so common. So I think one part is that, which I think was CSRD was really, really great at pointing out, was that sustainability work, sustainability data, sustainability reporting, it's not a one man or one woman show. It's a collective work that needs to happen. And that means that all different functions need to be engaged. So if you're not there yet, that your leadership team or board sees that this is the way it needs to happen, I would say that getting them on board to that journey and having them understanding that is the first step. And sometimes it can be easier to have someone else than yourself saying it. Speaking from experience, when I was sustainability manager, sometimes I would have said the same thing, and then I took in a consultant that said it, and then it worked. I guess it's a bit like those of you who are parents, and you tell your kids not to, chew with open mouth, and they do it still, and then a friend of them tells them the same, and then they stop doing that. We work the same, I would say, even as adults. So that's one thing. But also then, if they don't see the ROI, so return on investment, why should I put this investment in? Show them the ROI. How much time do you spend doing this manually? How much time would you save using software? And how much time is that, or how much money is that time worth? That's a quite straightforward calculation to do. But then also looking at other types of ROI. So for example, if you can't prove that you reduce your carbon emission by 2% per year and you lose your loan, what's the cost of that? If you cannot answer tenders or public procurement, for example, so you lose one public procurement to deliver for 5 years for a municipality, how much is that worth? Other customer demands, if you cannot answer to them, how much is that worth? How much is it worth that you have an engaged staff or engaged colleagues? So there are a multitude of ROIs that are perhaps not so easy to calculate with an exact number. Find a controller friend who can help you doing the best as best as you can, but at least show them that these are the different aspects that we actually should consider when it comes to sustainability and investing in sustainability. And as we said, if you don't have the insights into your business that this data gives you, you're blind. You're blind for the opportunities, but you're also blind for the risks. What would it cost if your stock is flooded, for example? That's a huge risk for some companies that have that type of physical climate risk in their value chain. And I mean, Stefan, you work with a lot with ROIs. Did I miss any that you would want to highlight?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. My career spent in business intelligence was a daily conversation with all customers but that just around financials, and that was easy numbers. That was just aggregating numbers from different, ERPs and whatnot. But today, business intelligence tools are a commodity in more or less every company. We are on the same journey with sustainability system software, because that there is a financial ROI to have control over this as well. It just need to be as important as knowing yesterday's sales numbers. This is on the table now, and we're getting there, and having a system in the backbone should be as normal as having a BI tool. So maybe we have time for one more question before we end today, and that's: when in the year is the best time to invest in a solution? For example, if I make a choice to buy a system now, will I be up and running before summer?
Yeah, great question. When is the time to do this? Well, if you think about your workload over the year, first of all, when do you have time to get up and running in a new system? So I think whichever path you choose, it's going to be an onboarding period. For us, it's about 2 months, but it also depends on very much the customer's data availability and knowledge, and how much data gaps there are to cover. But I would say during reporting, it's never nice to change processes, because during reporting, you want to get the report out and done, and it's quite heavy workload. So Q1, probably not. We have summer vacations coming up quickly. I, for my personal part, do not wish to spend summer vacations implementing a system, but I would love to be up and running when I come back in the fall. So I would say either now is a great time, and if you aim to be up and running before summer, considering that onboarding is about 2 months, now is really, really the time to take a decision. So now is a great time, and otherwise I would ensure to get the decision now during spring, so that I'm first in line after summer to get onboarded. Because one thing is also, you talked a bit about competitors, Stefan, earlier, and what are competitors doing, but what is everyone doing? Well, everyone is in the same situation when it comes to the legislation right now. Everyone has the same insecurities to work with, which means that we foresee that it might be quite a push towards the end of the year to get system support and to get support to get new processes up and running and for data collection. And there might be a queue, so make sure you're first in line. So therefore, I would either implement now or make sure I get to a decision now, so I can implement just after summer and have time to do tests and so on before my next reporting period starts.
Great. Thank you. And I think we're coming up to our 45 minutes on the dot. And there was a couple of more questions that we will answer separately. But thank you so much for today, Maria. Nice, good insights. And thank you, everyone who joined.
Thank you
looking forward to see the results from this survey as well in the next few weeks.
Great. Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.